So, where do we start? Again, thanks for coming again. It's super nice to
Yeah,
like, and again, thanks for like all the help with the with the engine because like having someone I can come crying to whenever something doesn't work it was like the top one thing like ever because like no I would like the engine would be desolate without your help, so that's really cool. Thanks.
and the point is not necessarily to give solutions at all times. It's also just to be able to mentor and train. Like the one thing you may have realized when interacting with me is that I don't necessarily like giving straight answers when
Yes.
people are asking questions, because I strongly believe it's much more worthwhile for people to walk the path than just being given the solution straight. And as a result, a lot of our interactions were me asking more questions and trying to guide you instead of just giving you straight solutions, which may potentially feel that I was wasting a bit of your time. I don't know, but yeah.
No, I actually love that because it's not fun. Like the main fun in programming is like solving the problems. That's why I hate web design because there you are not solving problems. You're just making things look pretty. So yeah, it's like that's the same thing I do when I teach kids Python. I just
Yep.
don't give them straight answers. I just guide them. Like what I do is explain the algorithm, and the implementation is up to them. That's a very nice cat.
Yeah, that's the stray cat that invaded our yard like a few months ago, and we are adopting him. But he is still a kitten and very playful. So the two cats that we have are in the vet right now. They are old. This one is still very young and playful.
And very wholesome.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, no,
amazing.
so I think in general it's better to just help people walk the path instead of just giving them straight answers. Not everyone likes that, Some people prefer to just have the answer because they feel that they are wasting their time or something like this. But
Yeah.
all in all, I think it's better to make mistake, repeat, learn through the process and so on. So it took me a while to get there, and maybe you could have gone faster by having more direct answers, but I think it was a lot more relevant.
Yes, like that was the fun thing. Like instead of you giving me an answer, you threw me another question which pointed like to the core of the problem. Like,
Mhm.
this imaginary scenario where you're at a crossing or at a point where paths cross and you just, have like 100 ways, and instead of like giving me a map of the area, you just like tell me a question which narrows down the selection, which is super
Mhm.
nice, and it was really amazing because yeah, like that's the point of the programming the PlayStation for me, because like if it wouldn't be half as much fun if the PlayStation could do floating numbers.
Yeah, for example, yeah.
So yeah, the post-mortem, as you have called it, and as it's
Mhm.
called in the industry.
Yep.
Well, um, right now I actually uh, yesterday I was actually presenting the engine in my local university,
Hmm.
and the fun thing about that is that my teacher told me about the fact that I will be actually contending in it, like I don't know 8 hours before. So when I asked around the other contestants, they were like, "Oh, I knew about it for months." And there I was,
Hmm.
like sitting and literally finishing the last two slides of the presentation five
I
minutes
see.
before my presentation started. Somehow I managed to win. I don't know how. It might be my talkative nature, the fact that like I can create like I think about myself that I'm quite good at selling things to people. Like, I can create a pretty bad thing and still actually hype it up so much that people are actually interested, which definitely was the case with the presentation itself. uh, it was actually kind of funny because they had this system they called 5:15, which meant you had only 5 minutes to actually present the project you created, and then the another 15 minutes were for
Mhm.
conversation, like people actually, the jury actually asking you questions which you had to answer. And I think that's
Mhm.
where my points were made because
We usually call that a lightning talk.
yeah. It was pretty lightning. Actually, it was fast paced. Sometimes even too fast for me. And yeah, like with me, it's impossible to limit the time for conversation, which is something we both of us experienced the last
Yep.
time we talked. So yeah, it was quite fun. But like one of the major drawbacks I realized about the project itself is the fact that pretty much the only person who can use it is still me. Um, the cat is amazing. It's probably
Yeah,
due to
yeah.
the lack of documentation, or the fact that there are so many specifics, especially in the asset building. That I
Mhm,
am
mhm,
still
mhm,
using the fudge bundles, which I still think are really nice and awesome work by Spicy JPEG.
mhm.
Even though we did find out there are some negatives about it. The problem with defining the frame buffers, if they are supposed to be horizontal or vertical, we did stumble. But the problem with this is I have no actual way in engine or in the build system to prepare those bundles. You have to actually know how to use them, and there is literally zero information telling you that you are supposed to use a fudge bundle.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's another thing I wanted to talk about, because the two of us hold very different opinions on what a build system should do.
Yes.
Um,
So on that note, like my experience comes really from working at Blizzard, from something like World of Warcraft, and there was literally two big pipelines when making builds. You had the pipelines of code, which was when we were pulling the subversion repository for World of Warcraft and building everything. And then you had a completely different process, completely different pipeline, to pull all of the assets from various databases, from various environments, and then build the files. So at the end of the day, everything is data driven. You have World of Warcraft, which is a binary and a bunch of files, and the binary itself doesn't really care about what you have on the disk. It's going to open files, start reading things from there, and start deciding what to do with them. So everything is data driven. You have a bunch of databases that have been just laid out in there and so on. And if you look at the state of the industry in general, even on PlayStation 1 games, you will have games that are like you can feel that this is how most games have been built. You have the main binary, and there is almost nothing you have to change in the main binary if you actually want to change something in the game, like if you want to uh, change some sprites, if you want to change some text and so on, um, all of the text length is going to be inside of data files. You will have everything nicely laid out and so on. Squaresoft goes even further than this, where some of their assets are actually completely pre-baked down to the GPU DMA chains. If you look at Final Fantasy VII, for example, all of the animated backgrounds are actually pre-computed with all of the DMA chain on the disk, right?
wow. Okay.
Um,
That's
so,
unexpected.
like,
Like I can imagine that, but I never stumbled even upon the idea of pre-computing it, and all my work has been circling around building it dynamically every frame, which now that I think of it is actually pretty stupid.
well, building it every frame is really useful when you have something which is very dynamic. Let's say that you have a shooter with lots of, I don't know, particles. So you have lots of particle effects. You are generating particles, and then you will need to have a very dynamic portion of these things appearing on screen. So you'll have to have some code that will generate the GMA chain for that. But definitely, when you look at the entirety of the draw of your scene, like all of the draw code that you are going to send to your scene, you may have static elements. So Final Fantasy VII, it's lots of pre-rendered backgrounds. All of these are pre-computed. The part that are dynamic are going to be the characters that are on screen. Like, so depending on which character are in your party, it's going to be fully dynamic and so on and so on. And the UI, like if you are looking
Yeah.
at the UI portion, it's going to be back to a static list of DMA chains, right? And like these sort of things tells you a little bit about the mentality of people, when they start working on this. But also, one very important aspect when building something like a game is that, well, usually you don't work alone. You are going to have software developers, you are going to have artists, you are going to have game designers. And in order to mix everything together, if you have like a single build, that makes things complicated because, for example, as a software engineer, I want to be able to try out new things. I want to be able to write some new code and validate new things and so on. Same thing with the artist. They may want to be able to try out some sprites and so on. They don't necessarily want to make a build by taking my latest experiments. Right? Same thing, if I'm going to have some experiments, I want to make sure that I'm using the same assets that I was using the moment before. So having like a two-step process, once like I have my code, I have a build, I have like the files, the asset to build files, I should be able to select which code I want and which build I want from my assets, right? There shouldn't be something in lockstep. It should be more flexible.
Yeah. So, but like my thinking was like creating you have like in makefiles you have targets, right?
Mhm.
So my thinking was like creating a, let's say, something, just throwing some stuff on the wall and seeing if it sticks. Creating like a Python script which will be responsible for actually packaging the assets. Because right now the amazing thing about Fudge Bundle is you can throw JPEGs into it, you can throw PNGs into it, you can throw WAV files, everything. It just it just computes it, converts it into the format you can work with, like raw ADPCM data. It builds color lookup tables, it prepares them, it even prepacks them into the VRAM, and you just copy pages into for every scene. It's amazing. So that was my mentality, and I think I see from where this pack everything pack everything pack pack everything together mentality, where it went from. Because I'm actually working in Unreal Engine quite a lot now. It's like my side job. And in Unreal Engine, that underneath the editor there, the two steps are separated. But when you are looking at it from the editor, it all seems interconnected so much. And a person usually doesn't even realize that when they build the game, it actually selects what to build.
Mhm.
So
And at the end of the day, this is a little bit of an orthogonal problem in the sense that you may still be able to have like if you want to put that in terms of repositories, it's perfectly fine like to have two different repositories, have one repository for the code, one repository for the assets, the first repository having its own build system in order to build the binary, the second repository having its own build system to build the assets. That's perfectly fine. You can use makefiles, you can use Python script, you can use anything you want, really, as long as you produce something at the end. And then nothing prevents you as well to have a sort of master repository. And you could do that with submodules if you are using Git, for example. You could use a master repository with submodules for the code and the assets, and have the end user just being able to build both at the same time if they want to. But having you can have a sort of master process on the main repository that triggers both, but having the two of them always being intertwined is what I'm against, right? Because the one is you can do one from the other, but not the other way around, right? You can
yes.
if you have two different separate builds, you can aggregate them into a single one, but it's a lot more difficult if you have a single build that is completely aggregated to start separating them. Right? So that's why I'm saying, regardless on how you actually do the build, it doesn't matter. I think the crux of the problem here is to make sure that you are not building everything at the same time, or you are not forcing people to build everything at the same time. It should be optional.
Yes, that's like that reminds me that right now, what it does actually is the thing the engine does is that it's using CMake to
Mhm.
like do all the asset crunching, which right now after what you have presented to me, I can agree with. It's not the optimal solution, and the fact that it just has one build target, which builds everything, and the fact that CMake doesn't really have tools to check changes in anything else but source codes, like if a binary file changes,
Mhm. Mhm.
a
Mhm.
JPEG changes something, it doesn't know about it. And
Right.
I did find tricks to like tell like make it, check the files, but
Mhm. Mhm.
it's really sketchy and it doesn't work half the time. So yeah, that's probably so like in my head the optimal solution would really be like what I will do is still use like CMake or anything else. I hate CMake, but like that's what I use right now.
Mhm.
And use CMake to actually let the developer still choose.
Yep.
Like uh, you can just select a target, the asset target and the binary target, then like a release target, which will create an actual release build with which builds both and ready to deliver
Mhm.
it. And um, yes, like let the developer choose without actually using CMake to crunch the things, but letting CMake to like call a script in a more
Yep.
sensible programming language. So that sounds good.
Yeah, and CMake can definitely trigger other scripts,
Yes,
trigger other sub builds which are not necessarily needed to be CMake themselves. So
yes.
that
That
is
was
that
like
is a reasonable solution.
yes, that was like the reason I'm asking is if you have anything like that sounds more optimal to you, because your experience is like up there on the ceiling. So
I mean, the main issue when you talk about like asset building and so on, like for World of Warcraft, the whole asset build system was completely custom. Even the code build system was very custom, and it was different from the build system from Overwatch, and it was different from the build system from Diablo, because each of these games had very specific needs, very specific problematic that they needed to solve at build time. World of Warcraft being an MMO, you had to crunch like giant maps
wait,
full
so
of.
the games had like ad hoc engines, like engines
Oh
created
yeah,
specifically for the games?
yes. World of Warcraft is a completely ad hoc engine. Diablo is a
Wow,
completely ad hoc engine as
that's
well, which is
that's really
different
cool.
from the engine in World of Warcraft. StarCraft also had a different engine. There was some common code that was shared,
Yeah, like
but when you look at the majority of big games, that's going to be like this. They will have their own build system, they will have their own assets, organization and building, which is going to be extremely specific for what they are building. The
which
map
actually makes
building
sense
system.
because
Yeah.
which actually makes sense back in the day, which makes you sound old. Sorry. back
That's
in the
okay.
day,
I am.
back in the day, computers didn't have as much power, and probably like building stuff, like building code that is not universal but specific for one use case, was probably a lot better performance wise. Am I
Well,
doing the right
and
thinking
not
here?
just that, but for example, as I was saying, World of Warcraft, it's a big MMO. You have a giant map, like the map
Yes.
itself, which is a 3D, uh, like a sort of 3D membrane that represents the
Yes.
whole world. That needs to be shrunk, that needs to be parsed into various ways in order to handle things like collisions, in order to handle things, you have a lot of problems that you need to solve by doing this. And now you compare with Diablo, and Diablo, it doesn't have this sort of maps. It has a completely different mapping system because it's building blocks that are uh, uh, glued together in order to create the game. So you don't have the same problematic of building the maps at all. And you compare it with StarCraft, well, it's a completely different problematic as well because now you have a 2D map with elevation and visibility and so on. Like the visibility information of World of Warcraft is not going to be the same at all as the visibility information of StarCraft. So for all of these games, you have to develop your own asset pipeline at some point. It's you can always have something generic, and that's why you have Unity and Unreal that works very well for smaller indie
Yeah,
games that
that's
are
that's like that's like the amazing thing for me, because these engines usually have like tons of features which are aiming to cover as most of these use cases as possible, and then the engines try their best to pack out everything they don't need into the final binary, and it's like a completely opposite approach, and it's really cool.
if you take really any AAA games, like modern AAA games, they will never use the vanilla. Even if they say, "Hey, we are using Unreal, we are using Unity or
Yeah,
something
man.
like this," they will not use it vanilla. They will not use it without any changes. There will always be customization done in there. Like even modern AAA games. So, for example, yeah, I'm thinking about Spider-Man, the PlayStation Spider-Man. This one is a custom engine. I'm fairly certain because the Insomniac usually have only custom engines. But they were saying that compared with their in-house engine, they had to do some modifications in the game engine in order to handle the swinging. The fact that the way Spider-Man is able to swing around and have this sort of weird physics. The
Yeah,
physics of the swing is different from the physics of just
a
Call of
rogue. Yeah.
Duty or any other game around. So you will always have customization when you do something that is a bit crazy. So sure, for smaller games, for smaller, either 2D or very like FPS style, you will be
Yeah.
able to find one size fits all problems that can be solved. But as soon as you do something a bit more specific, so that basically goes back to, I'm trying to answer your question of saying, in my experience, what is best? Like, in my experience, people just do custom things. I know that's not always the case, but it's very, very, very common still to have extremely custom build pipelines for assets.
Yeah, it's like for the sanity.
So, in my opinion, the best way to handle these things is to provide some building blocks, some examples. Hey, you want to build a 2D game? Well, here are some building blocks. Some independent building blocks, and here is an example of a CMake or a
Yeah.
script that is bringing all of these building blocks together for a single for building my Tetris or whatever game.
Yeah, that was yeah. I'm thinking of cleaning up the Tetris as much as possible, like commenting, making like half of it comments explaining the stuff, and just making it like a 2D game example on how to use.
And then for an FPS, you can potentially reuse some of the same building blocks. So if you
Yeah.
have, music or a sound, well, that may be the same asset pipeline creation for the sound of both games. But then you will probably use different building blocks for the 3D
Yeah.
textures, for the 3D models, and so on that goes into an FPS game. So in my opinion, it's probably better to have some building blocks and have some examples on how to bind them together in order to create your final binary, your final assets bundle.
Yes, that's definitely what I'm going to change. And another problem, because I just realized I'm not at all following my bullet points, which I made,
It's okay.
is, and this is a big question, which I've given a lot of thought over the entire time I was developing it, and the literal words on the paper are, who should be in charge, and the meaning is, who is in charge of the runtime? Should it be on the PlayStation specifically? Should it be the engine, or should it be the game? Because right now, the engine is the manager of the runtime. The game has its own entry point, and the engine is managing that entry point, and it basically works on events. The engine calls events, and the game really has no say at all in the engine's inner workings, which I personally think is wrong. But that's how it works now. So I would like your opinion on that.
So, I mean, this is an opinionated question. Personally, I'm in favor of event-driven programming, which means that uh, if you use Psycho, like Psycho has that sort of structure anyway. I'm very much in favor of having, the library or the framework taking over main, taking over event distribution, for several reasons. Like, in terms of responsibilities, personally, I'm a server guy. I built my career creating server code. And in general, server code is extremely event driven. But even when you look at games in general, you will have tons of event being fired. What I'm getting at is that I'm good at writing this sort of code. And in terms of responsibility, it's probably better to just trust somebody who's done that, right? Like, you don't want to write your own event code for your game engine. You want to be able to delegate this to somebody else. Now, that's the problem with opinionated frameworks. Like, if that doesn't fit your usage case, and you really need to have something different, like you really want to be able to handle the event loop yourself, then in this case, this solution might not be the one you want. To look for different solutions, and I think that's okay. Like, at the end of the day, one size fits all is not necessarily a good answer for things. Like, I believe strongly that having an engine that's doing all of the event handling for you is probably the right answer for most people. And it's probably better to try and specialize and do something excellent in that role. Like, really try to fill in that gap, and make sure that we have something really solid for event dispatching and so on. And if people want to do something different, that's fine too. But like, my opinion in general, and that's not just for event, it's probably better to have something modular, to be able to delegate responsibilities to the relevant people, to the relevant engine, to the relevant pieces. Psycho in itself is, for example, like more for the event dispatcher, like, and trying to handle the hardware abstraction a little bit. Then you have, for example, like completely independent from Psycho, you have like the mod player, which is able to play music, and you can use it with Psycho, or you can use it with the old Psycho, or you can use
Yeah.
it with PS Noob, or you can use it with anything you want. It's independent. It works completely on its own, and we can. Psycho doesn't have any texture management, like it doesn't handle VRAM management at the moment. And I don't think that would be the right thing to do. I would rather have a separate module that is doing this, having like an optional module that goes inside of Psycho, and that's going to be able to handle like memory management for VRAM, because some people just want to be able to statically use their VRAM instead. So my approach in general is extremely modular. There will be some core pieces that are not going to be swappable, and that's going to be the minimum viable product in a certain way. You are going, like for Psycho, it's going to be the GPU piece that's going to be dispatching events,
Like
and then you can
allocators and
attach
stuff.
it. Sorry.
Like allocators and stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
it's
and then you can start attaching pieces on top of Psycho, and Psycho provides you these pieces, but it's completely optional. Like, it has a debugging font system. Psycho can start without it. It's not mandatory. If you do not access the debug font system, it's not going to be linked inside of your final binary. Same thing with the CD-ROM access. You can use the Psycho libraries for accessing CD-ROM. If you don't use them, they are not going to be linked to your binary. It's not going to be there. It's not going to be, you know, uh, uh, waiting on you. So, like, that explains my philosophy in general. So I would say you have that minimal viable product, which is event driven, and then you will have other things on top of it.
well,
I'm in favor of events.
yeah. I think you just exposed the biggest flaw of my engine, like the biggest one, and that's segmentation of the modules or of the inner
Mhm.
workings. Because right now, and I'm very ashamed of it, the entire engine is one big interlocked blob. Everything depends on everything. Everything is using something else's code, and even it goes it it gets as bad as like some functions being in the wrong modules or wrong files and everyone else accessing them, which is a problem. I right now locally have a rewrite branch, which is not really a rewrite branch because it's basically a completely fresh start. We just copy some code from the original one, and yeah, that's a big problem. And like again, like I haven't even thought about using the linker in this way because it's standard procedure, but like I like to let out standard procedure from my head a lot because I like to lock onto things and not let other ideas in. Not my own, other people's ideas always, but not my own. So I know that like PS Noob does that, whatever we think about that thing. And it does that. I think it does that actually pretty well because it has you have your makefile and then you define the classic linker parameters. It's just L name of the library, L name of the library, which is probably something I should do.
So Psycho has a different approach there. Like the linker, modern linker, has garbage collection.
Yes.
So if you look at the Psycho library itself, it contains everything. You have psycho.a, and it has all of the objects from everybody. However, it's relying on the fact that the garbage collection happens at link time. If your main binary is not going to use some features, it won't be there. Right? It's going to be thrown out by the linker. Now, it's a bit more difficult to ensure this is going to always work. But luckily, we have modern tooling in order to help with this. Like that's why you have continuous integration testing in order to be able to ensure these sort of things. And at the end of the day, this is a bit of a like it doesn't matter how you implement it, like how you actually ensure that your system is modular. I think it's important, however, as you said, to make sure that your system is modular. It doesn't matter how. And I'll also say it, like, don't feel bad. It's actually a difficult task. Like being able to properly segment your work into different modules and make sure that there is no circular dependencies and so on and so on is a very difficult task. If you look at Redux itself, it's composed of something like 6 or 7 big modules. And I'm trying really hard to ensure that these modules are respected in this way. There is even recently I made it so that it's possible to extract some of the libraries from Redux into independent binaries and independent libraries, and there is continuation integration testing to ensure this works. But to your as a sort of excuse, I will say this is a difficult task. It's much easier to just go and start writing code and have everything put together. Yes, that's perfectly reasonable, perfectly
that's cool
understandable.
because like I just realized like my head lives in the runtime and not in build time. Like I see all of the problems in the runtime itself and not in build time, which is actually where it's like different kinds of magic. One magic happens in runtime, the other magic happens in build time, and the magic in build time, which absolutely blew my mind, is that you can write a C++ class which binary structure is going to be perfect for like a GPU command. When I saw that, like my face was this. I was just looking at it for like 3 minutes, and that was just out of the world for me. Then I read some stuff. I understand it a little bit more now, but that was crazy for me at the moment. Like my head was spinning about structs and now a class.
It's not easy. I will say, like, to this point, when I'm writing code, sometimes I will do these mistakes. I will write some code and I will have some things like, oh crap, I'm doing a security dependency, and it's only after, like, I do my code change and I send a pull request. People have been asking me, why are you sending pull requests to yourself? Well, it's so that I can trigger all the testing, And I write my code, I send my pull request to myself, all of the tests trigger, and I just get compilation errors like, oh crap, I just added the security dependency. I didn't realize it when I was writing it, So it's, to your point as well, it's not automatic. Like your brain, my brain as well, works this way, where I'm thinking a bit more in terms of runtime, not necessarily compile time. That being said, there are lots of tools nowadays that helps thinking in compile time. So you have on Visual Studio Code, you have the ClaimD extension, which helps you dissect structures, that helps you dissect interaction between code. You have Godbolt. Godbolt is an absolutely amazing tool and able to help you dissect code as you like. More often than not, I'm going to use Godbolt in order to evaluate what I'm writing. Like I'm going to go and say, okay, what happens if I do this? Like I'm not sure. I'm not going to go first in my compiler in my Visual Studio. I will go into Godbolt first. I'm going to write some code. It's like I see that okay, that doesn't actually do what I thought it would do. Let me try and change a few things. So when you say, hey, the GPU class and so on, oh, that blew your mind. It's like it's not something that came immediately, right? That was an iteration process in order to make sure that I understand what the compiler was going to emit using Godbolt, using other tools and so on, right? So uh, to your point, like it's a learning process to go and make sure that you understand the tools and that you use them correctly in order to get to this state where you can use both runtime and compile time properly. And modern C++ now has a lot more tools as well in the toolbox for you. Const expression, const eval are tools in the toolbox that have been added in order to help you have more compile time thinking. Like if you start flagging your code with const expression and const eval, the compiler is going to start yelling at you and create errors if the new code that you write, doesn't violates the const eval construct that you put in place in the first place, right? So you can start putting a lot of constraints, you can start putting a lot of restrictions into your code. It's not used at runtime, it's used at compile time, and the compiler is going to help you make the right choices if you tell the compiler about the contract that you want to put in place. So that's why you have all of these new tools. It's not for runtime, it's really for compilation time.
Yeah, that's the first time I stumbled upon actually like giving the compiler more thinking than just GCC-O
Mhm,
was actually in Spicy JPEG's code because his fudge bundles right now use hashes to identify the individual assets which have
mhm,
like
mhm,
names. And let's say you write a function which pulls out a hash, it's a linked list, it goes through the linked list, finds the hash, whatever.
mhm,
But the fun stuff was the fact that um, under the condition that you used only constant strings in the
mhm,
functions to like define the hashes and calculate the hashes, you can actually let the compiler write code, uh,
yep,
and then the compiler itself calculates the hash and
mhm,
just spits it out into the binary, and you don't have to do it on the actual hardware, which was really cool.
mhm.
And another thing, like right here on my bullet point, if you consider this closed. Sorry, I have to get through this because then I have to watch it to
Yeah,
actually
go
release
ahead.
the video, which was the
Yeah, yeah,
biggest
yeah.
problem with the last one. I actually still have the
Yes.
last one like halfway edited, and there is still like 45 minutes worth of watching it and picking out stuff. It's hardcore, but
Yep.
yeah, but like the next point right here, and that's what I wanted to open when we were talking about linking. But let's reopen that rabbit hole. Right now, what I am doing is having the engine itself as the main code and linking the
Mhm,
game into that.
mhm.
So, would you do that the other way around?
No, really, no. I
That's
think
a very
that's
straight answer.
yeah. I think that's the right thing to do. That's the
Okay.
right approach. Um, Again, that's an opinionated question, but no, I think that's the right approach.
And one more thing, I saw again PS Noob having that feature thanks to Spicy JPEG, dynamically linking. Do you think it's
Mhm.
just a cool gimmick, or do you think it has an actual use on the PlayStation?
So, okay, the dynamic linking part. When you look at in general, like what has it been used for? Um, Historically speaking, dynamic linking has been used for plugins.
Yes.
So Winamp, for example. you had Winamp that was just the player, and you will have plugins that you would load as dynamic libraries in order to have extensions that are just showing up in there and so on, right? In games themselves, it's a lot more rare. Like you will have very little usage for these sort of things in video games, and even in modern software. Like PCSX used to have plugins, so all of the GPU, SPU, and so on, used to be plugins. It turns out that it's not flexible, because you have to crystallize the API
Yeah.
between the main binary and the plugin itself,
Because
and
like
then
every
all of a
emulator
sudden,
was using that. Like still like
yeah,
80% of emulators are still on the plugin system, which I actually
yes,
thought which I actually thought was like the best approach, but now that I think about it, actually having to make a good connector between the two can be quite demanding.
right. So I got rid of the plugin system in Redux, and Stanzek didn't ever write any plugin system in DocStation. And the reason for that is that the plugin system just prevents you from making the code evolve, right? As soon as you put up a public API, you have to stick with
You
it,
have to stick with
right?
it, yeah? Which is the biggest
And
problem of
so,
Windows right now.
well, yes, so that's a very difficult thing to have.
Wow.
Um, so now, realistically, when you look at something for the PlayStation, again, you will find some games that will load dynamically some pieces of binaries, because there is only 2 MB. So many games were actually like, for example, Final Fantasy. You have a small kernel, and it's loading an additional binary in order to render the world, and then you go into battle. It's unloading the world binary and it's loading the game battle binary instead. So it's swapping in and out pieces of binaries like this, but they are all static. It's not dynamic. It's all like being linked at very specific location memory. It's precompiled. Like you have tools in order to do this. You can do this with the old PsyQ. You can do this with the modern toolchain. Just having what we call overlays that are just being loaded at very specific locations. The one thing I will say about dynamic linking, like dynamic libraries like this, it will be very interesting to have this in a modular game. So let's say that you have uh, like let's say you have somebody actually managing to publish a new game, like printing a disc that's being that can boot on the PlayStation. Um, then all of a sudden, you get into the problem that modern game design, modern game cycle requires a lot of patching, a lot of, like back in the days when you were making a game, you just make the game, that's it, it's done. You never touch it again. Modern
No,
development,
no, no, no.
people
The
are
modern
doing like,
developers release games not finished and then finish them, yeah.
right, cool. But there is lots of DLCs, there are lots of,
Yeah.
add-ons and so on. And
The game
so
lives on.
for Yes. And so for this specifically, I would say that the dynamic library system would be really good. Like you have a base game, and the base game may have some DLL system in place for future extensions, right? Not necessarily for the game itself. Could be, because if you have it, might as well, but then it might be able to load new pieces of code from memory card or from other locations in order to augment the game dynamically in the future. If you're building a game that is not going to be extensible, then why bother? You just have all of your binary into a single place. That's it. You're done. If you want to build a modular game that's going to have extensions, that's going to have plugins, that is going to have future work done by other people, not you, then it might make some sense. But like in general, if you are going to build a dynamic linking system for, I don't know, music, like hey, you're going to say, hey,
Yeah.
here's my music player, and you can use my music player into your game. Why not just give us the source code? Like, and this, and you go back even to the problem of what I was saying earlier, which is if you are giving like a precompiled binary for your music system, then what if the user doesn't actually use all of the features of it,
Yeah.
right? And that's going to be deadweight code inside
Using
of
a
your
RAM.
DLL that you're
Yeah.
giving to people. If your code is modular enough, it's written enough, well enough, and you just distribute the source code for it, then at leak time, it will be able to call all of the unused features from it, and it's going to have a lot lighter footprint. So I think it has some usage, some very narrow usage, and in the general case, I don't believe it will be really useful. It's a very
Yes.
heavyweight solution for a very specific problem.
Yeah, the only problem I planned on using it, where I planned on using it, is hiding secrets in the game because like my mentality, the
Mhm.
entirety of the stuff I'm doing on YouTube should be open source because it's I want people to yell at me for bad code. It's fun,
Mhm.
and like I'm still making that horror game. That's why I'm writing the engine because when I released the first horror
Mhm.
video, I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. Like writing everything from scratch using PS Noob, like was crazy. And the thing I wanted to do, like hiding secrets, because when you hide secrets and you hide them in the source code, like normally in the base code, they're not really secrets. But what you can do is create a DLL, obfuscate the assembly itself as much as you can, and have like a simple function that like returns some string or something, which can
Mhm.
actually be
Mhm.
the secret itself, which is the fun
So for,
stuff.
for for this sort of case, I I think that's a valid argument. That goes back a little bit to what I was saying, which is uh, you have a game that is going to be extensible, and you don't know the extension in advance. So in that, I think that fits what we just was talking about a little
Yeah.
bit earlier. That being said, you could also just use plain overlays for this. Like you don't need the whole DLL system. You can just use plain overlays because, in your case specifically, you may also know in advance what the secret is. And if you only have like a couple in advance and you're never going to touch them ever again, then static linking of pieces of
Oh,
overlays will work fine as well. Right?
like my brain totally forgot that I can build a library, a static version of a library, and then just link it in.
Mhm.
My brain left out this information for some reason, but that's a better approach. I agree.
I, I think, and so the dynamic linking approach is very difficult because all of a sudden you have to solve a bunch of problems in order to ensure that this is going to work fine. Funnily enough, when I was working on the PS2 SDK, I actually added a dynamic linking system, and I had to solve a bunch of problems for this, and it was difficult. But there is, and I know this approach that I had on the PS2 SDK is different from the approach that Spicy used, but I'm familiar with the problem. I'm familiar with the limitations and so on. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's a very heavyweight solution. So just like with any tool, it needs to be used in according to what you actually really want. Like um, that's always the problem of when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily want this in game development because you rather should be being extremely mindful of the technology you're using, extremely mindful of the resources that you're using, and always double guessing yourself. You should always be like, am I making the right choice here? Am I really doing the optimal solution? Or am I going to waste resources doing
And
this?
yeah.
Especially for something like the PlayStation only has 2 MB, right? The
Yeah.
PlayStation is only 33 megahertz.
Well, you're
Um,
actually talking to someone who's never managed to hit that limit yet, so I never
yeah, but
managed to hit the limit yet, but I can
in
imagine you did quite a lot
comparison,
of times.
when you have like modern Call of Duty, which is 200 gigabytes on your hard drive, and requires 12 gigabytes of VRAM and
Yeah, it's
32
crazy.
gigabytes of RAM, um, I it's true that modern hardware, like this giant rig that's next to me, is letting you have some more lax approach to these sort of things, and it's
Yeah.
much easier to just think about it like, whatever.
I have a powerhouse.
I'm
Let's just no need to
yeah, I
optimize.
just
Just get it out in time.
and look, in Redux, in Redux there is an option, there is an optimization. It's turned off by default, but I found that I can optimize, I can speed up rendering, I can speed up the software rendering by about 5% when there is a lot of dithering happening. So if you have a lot of, the dithering that happens
Yes.
on the screen, I found an optimization that's about 5% faster.
Wow.
The optimization requires 500 megabytes of memory, right? And as I was writing it at the time, I was like, that's a lot. And then
Everything is
after I
a
was like,
min-max problem.
no, it's
Everything.
not. Like 500 megabytes. I have 64 gigs in this machine. In my laptop, I have 32 gigs. My phone has like 16 gigs or something like this. 500 megs. Yeah, sure, we can spare that. So it's always a matter of thinking about the right
Yeah.
the right problem with like what you actually have. And all of a sudden on the PlayStation, solutions that are acceptable in other cases are definitely not acceptable on the PlayStation.
Well, it's just and now I lost my thinking process right there. Let me just go through my notes again so I catch my breath. Yes, it's done. That's kind of done. Yep. Here. Here is like yeah. Well, yeah. Now I managed to remember what I wanted to talk about. Like, it just in the end, when you just narrowed it down as much as you can and you lose all respect for the art of coding, it's and optimizing, it's everything. It's just all min maxing. Like everything, like 5% minus 500 megabytes.
Yeah, I
And it's like you can like even with the plugin system, it's like even with using dynamic linking, it's like maximize the the English is
flexibility
a
or
hard flexibility, exactly, the
yeah,
flexibility, and just minimize the overload, the hardware overhead.
yep,
And it's like thinking in these ways, and now you don't have just a one min max problem, but you have like 100 of them, and
yes.
every min max problem affects all the other 99.
And I keep saying these words. It's good to have options. It's good to provide options to people so that they can make the smart choices, right?
Yeah,
So
that was like the
each option,
catchphrase of our last talk. It's good to have
yes,
options.
yes,
That
yes,
was
yes.
what it
Like
was about.
exactly. Like if you ensure that there are options available to people and that the pros and cons of each approach is properly understood, then the right thing to do at this point is to let people decide what is the right approach for them. And that's part of even the development process. You are writing a piece of code. You are going to make choices depending on what is right for this usage case. I'm not against the idea of dynamic linking. As I said, I wrote one for the PlayStation 2. I didn't write one for the PlayStation 1 because like too much to do, too little time, and Spicy already has one. But it's there, and I will encourage people to
Yes,
use it for the right reasons.
that's incredibly cool because it's even if it has in some very 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 specific use it makes sense, but like you can never predetermine the number of uses where it makes sense. Like
Absolutely.
every time there is going to be someone with this weird but cool idea of software which is going to require something very specific, and yeah, when the person finds something like that, it can make a smile on their face.
Yes, absolutely. And I will. If you look at Redux itself, like if you really take a good look at Redux, it has something like 30 dependencies in there, right?
Yes, I
Um,
did clone it
there
for a
is
long time.
there is like so you have Lua in there.
Yeah.
You
Um, I don't know if you can hear me, but I lost you there. Hello? Can you hear me?
That I'm bound to Lua?
Yes, I lost you for like, I don't know, 15 seconds. So
Okay.
last thing I heard is first mention of Lua.
Yes. So in Redux, like there is about 30 dependencies in there. I have Lua, I have OpenGL bindings, I have I forgot the name of this library which lets you do like spline rendering. There is Protobuf. There is like so many dependencies in there that all mixed together, and everything is almost bound to Lua. So you have the emulator, all of the aspect of the emulator is bound to Lua. You have the protobuf that lets you communicate with the external world. You can do TCP/IP
Yes,
out of there.
which is
You
the
have a web
coolest
server
thing.
and so on. And on the PCSX Redux Discord server, there are some people coming in there showing, "Hey, I just did this." I'm looking at it like like and like there is one guy who wrote an entire dissertation, like a thesis that he presented using PCSX Redux by doing machine learning on a racing game. And he was using Lua in order to look at the status of the game, export it to a machine learning system, and then feed
So
back.
cool.
And
That's,
it's published. There is
oh
the paper
god.
published. There is some YouTube videos, and you can see it running. I'm like, whoa, that's impressive. And
Yes.
you have all of the values because yes, I bound as well EMGUI to Lua, so you can draw widgets, and you have all the widgets in real time. They're showing the speed of the car, uh, the uh, the engine noises, and so like you have tons of widgets
Yeah.
showing it in real time, and like that's really cool. And people just come and show me, hey, I just did this. Like, wow, I never thought about this, but
Yes.
that's really nice.
And that's the
And
result of
so
giving people options.
yes, exactly. That's the result of just mashing everything together in there. It's like, hey, just pick and choose what you
Be
want,
my
and
guest.
some people,
Do fun stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like Freddie Mercury said, do whatever you want with my music, but don't make it boring.
That's exactly that. Yes.
Well, and I almost ran out of the biggest problems I like
Mhm.
realized about my engine, but I know once I just put the source code up there, like on GitHub, like I'm going to get like the comment section is going to be fun, and and the issues are going to be fun, but like right now, I would like to just quickly summarize, and actually we still need to work out because right now I have my own like hardware abstractive HAL,
Mhm.
uh, which was never meant to be there forever. It was like for my own
Mhm.
learning purposes because it's like it's like my teacher when we were first like writing, using a simple two line LCD on the Arduino. We didn't use a library at first. We wrote our own at first, and then we used the library because if you know the inner workings, is then much easier and you to use the library because you know how it works on the inside, which was my thinking here, and I do want to like take Psycho, and build like because Psycho does some level of abstraction, and my goal is to like make a higher level of abstraction.
Yep.
I want to find that sweet spot for because
Yep.
my goal is to make an easy entry into the development for the PlayStation, which is going to be like I need to find a sweet spot. Right now, the target is something even like Unity, like something that can just get your
Mhm. Mhm.
dopamine
Mhm.
going. Like, oh my god, this is cool. Okay, how does it work on the inside? And then people can step down, like let's say to
Yep.
Psycho, and when they do fun stuff with Psycho, let's say they want to go even deeper and do
Mhm.
bare
Mhm.
metal. So like make these kinds of steps. And right now I want to use Psycho for it because if I use components from Psycho and I can even expose them to the programmer of the engine, then it's going to be easier to transfer from the engine and go to Psycho.
Mhm. So one step further than this, I actually never talked about it before to anybody, but one of my hidden goals of Psycho is that to be enough of an abstraction layer that it could potentially be swapped out for anything else. And
Wow.
if you think about it, it would be entirely possible right now to re-implement Psycho targeting PC, right? And that's ultimately my goal. If you write something for Psycho, there is nothing that should prevent you from recompiling your code, targeting the PC version of Psycho, and have a native PC version of your software. Right? Uh, and I think that is entirely doable, especially because Psycho deals with draw calls that are just GPU based. We have, rendering engines for this GPU, so it should be entirely possible to have a PC version of Psycho, which instead of sending draw calls to the GPU, just render them internally and just
Yes.
display them using OpenGL or something like this
Yeah.
into your PC. So in terms of abstraction layer, in terms of sweet spots, this is usually where I've been drawing the line in what I've been doing with Psycho. I've been trying really hard to hide all of the aspects that are really, really, really specific to the hardware, while preserving anything that could be just swapped out very
Yeah.
easily for something that works on PC. So that's why you still have repeatable timers that are just part of
Yeah.
Psycho. You have frame count, part of, it's very simple.
Yes.
And then you have things like uh, the main GPU draw calls, the main GPU primitives that are very easy to interpret on the PC. Right now, this is probably the lowest layer I can do without exposing bare metal
Yes.
pieces of the hardware and still keeping it really fast. One aspect of Psycho is it's fucking fast.
It's extremely fast. Like, I actually compared your Tetris to mine, and let's set aside the fact that you probably have way more better optimized game logic than me. Still, like the code just runs faster. Like doing some crazy stuff,
Yeah.
like creating immersely complex collisions and stuff. Like your code just let's go, done. My
Yeah.
code, and then
No,
I created a 50 by 50 block with random stuff
yeah.
and wanted to calculate a collision, half a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was crazy.
Um, so like I've been trying to have that, like, talking about the sweet spot of things. Personally, I'm trying to keep that sweet spot around at that location, which is almost bare metal, but not exactly. Letting
Yes.
the user do about anything they want in a way that should be easy to swap for something on the PC. That's been my general logic when designing all of the Surface API of Psycho. When it comes to your usage of it, hopefully that should be the same thing, as in you should be only using APIs of Psycho that should be easily swappable for something that works on the PC. And if you have something that doesn't fit the bill, we should discuss. That's the point where we should be going and like designing something together. If you're going to be like, hey, if I'm going to write this, it's not going to be portable on the PC. I'm missing, like, there's a gap in Psycho right now. How can we solve this? This is how I would envision this moving forward. But like you're right in the general sense. You can use Psycho as a replacement for the hardware abstraction layer that you have, and then expose up like more higher versions of game engine, of objects, of collisions and
Components
whatnot,
and stuff.
which are definitely something I do not want to do in Psycho.
Yes,
That's
exactly. And that's exactly what I know about Psycho. And like, if I now a really ugly sounding thing, I'm aiming to make like the Scratch of PS1 programming. You know, uh,
Yeah.
the point being, creating. I really want to hold on to the scene game object component system because people know that
Yep.
stuff. They know it from
Yep.
Unity. They know it from basically everything, and in this case, managing assets, everything is done. Like there is basically almost zero knowledge you have to have when writing code on my engine right now. Like you don't have to know almost any specifics of the place of the hardware itself, except like the amount of RAM. So you have some limitation, and in my head, actually, the limitations, the extra overhead I built might actually be a good thing because it gives people motivation to go down to Psycho.
Yes,
And it's like you
and
won't be able
that's
to create a fast FPS shooter with amazing particles,
mhm,
but you'll be able to create a pretty good clone of Tetris or any other nice game, a
correct.
2D game, a 2D jumper. And that should like get really the fun stuff, the fun chemicals in the head going, and people want to dig deeper, deeper, deeper. Just entry point. That's
Completely agree with that.
basically
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree with that. That's the right approach because, and you look at even the current modern days of engine development. You have the big war between Unity versus
yeah.
Unreal. And well, that's the same sort of things. Unity lets you do a lot of things very easily, but it's also limiting. And if you want to go and do something bigger, that's going to be like have more things on the screens and better rendering and so on, you may want to start digging inside and do things yourself. So that is exactly the same sort of approach, and I think that's the right approach. Absolutely.
Yes. So now, what I'm planning to do, of course, if you agree with that, um, releasing this entire thing as a
Mhm.
separate interview. And right now, I would like to create a segment which basically summarizes, but in a quick way. We can't really afford to go into rabbit holes because
Yep.
people
Yep.
watching
Yep. Yep.
YouTube videos.
Yep.
YouTube is all about social stuff or social media nowadays is all about dopamine. You still need new things or you get bored. So let's just, I don't know, like let's take like 4.5 minutes, something like that. Like summarize the plan.
Mhm.
So like let's just I don't want to act as the conductor in this thing because that will be very weird, but I'm sure we can find some synergy. I will like open it up and whenever you feel like it,
Mhm.
just steal the word from me.
So let's start with what you learned. Like when writing your engine, if you were to summarize it in like 1 minute, what are the good things and what are the bad things from your experience?
Well, the I didn't know what rabbit hole I was getting into. I was
Mhm.
really over optimistic at the beginning, and some of the problems, like I knew the where would the problems occur, but I just failed to realize the depth of those problems. Like looking at GTE functions, person goes like, yeah, GTE functions, easy. Then actually looking at all the stuff in there and actually understanding all the registers and stuff like that, it gets hard. And uh, as we talked in the interview or in the talk, um, as we talked in the talk, now there's going to have to be a cut because I lost again. I lost my thinking again. But let me remember. Yes, what I failed to do the most is realize there's stuff happening in compile time as well, which is one of the biggest issues because my head was really only in the plastic casing of the PlayStation itself, in the runtime. And the usability of the code itself created some actual brutal problems for anyone else but me to use it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's the current plan. The current plan is to clean it up as much as possible, um, replace the hardware abstraction layer from my own, which is not very good, and instead of that, use Psycho, which is an amazing what do you call it? Framework, library,
I will say framework, yeah.
framework.
And the hardware abstraction layer is probably the right answer here as well. Yes.
Yes, here Nicolas's framework, which is going to act as a abstraction layer, and I'm going to build this engine, rebuild basically this engine on top of that, and the idea being, which we talked about here for quite a long time, that the people who are in the PS1 community know that getting into it is really hard. The hardware is pretty specific. It's unlike basically, and it's unlike modern computers, even though it has some nice. It basically they built x86 on on MIPS, but that's fun. And creating an entry point from which in which you won't be able to create like a super nice FPS game. You will be able to create a simple 2D platformer or a simple 3D game, but it should like, as I said before, the fun chemicals in your brain going and wanting you to go deeper and then maybe use Nicolas's Psycho directly, and then maybe even after some years, even try to do stuff on the bare metal. So yeah, the literal point being, let's try and make the PlayStation 1 developer community to grow as easily as possible.
Yep. And even for your own development, like the hope in here is that Psycho is built in a way that is going to force you onto certain path, into certain way of thinking in terms of compile time, and compile time optimization and so on. So hopefully, as you were saying, some of the problems that you had with your own engine was you didn't think enough about these problems, about compile time optimization and compile time like representation of what you had. Psycho is going to really force you to think about that, right? Psycho has been built around that idea that everything has to be really carefully crafted at compile time, and so hopefully, you'll have a better overall product at the end by forcing yourself towards these paradigms.
Yeah, it just sounds like we're building the PlayStation 1 university, and I am the head teacher of the first grade, you are the head teacher of the second grade. Almost sounds like that. But yeah, that's the current battle plan. I
Yeah.
hope I can get on with it faster than 11 months.
And I understand that the first time you wanted to do it fairly alone, even though we helped you, but this was fairly much one way. Like you were asking for help, and we were helping you whenever you had some problems. This time, I think we should be able to have a bit more two-way communication, two-way process in order to develop this together, design this together, and have like potentially even involve even more people. I know that on the PSX dev server, there are definitely a lot more people who might provide some very interesting insights. So we should be able to bring in more people and design something altogether that will be optimized and useful for everyone.
Yeah. So, right now I think that about wraps it up. I think it's going to be understandable from it. Right now, two separate things. The entire interview is one video just to, like a podcast, just to, do stuff while
Yep.
listening to it. And the other one being the segment in the video. Let's just totally out of order record like I don't know. I'm going to just record like an introduction and an ending to the segment so it like has so it
Mhm.
feels right. So yeah, it's going to feel very weird doing this out of order, but I'm going to try introduce you right now or something like that.
No worries.
Okay, so you've successfully made it to the last part of the video, which means you don't find this topic absolutely boring. And now, here with me, I have Nicolas Noble, who is the person from the absolutely amusing cameo you've seen a few minutes back. Yes, it's the person who's helped me a lot, who I went crying to a lot. So, this is a very big thanks to him, because without him, none of this would be possible. Hello.
Hi, and I've been absolutely happy to help you along this way. That was a very delightful experience for me as well. And yes, I hope that everybody enjoyed that.
And one more thing to the introduction, Nicholas is wearing an absolutely amazing shirt. I love that thing. It looks absolutely amazing.
I have a huge collection of T-shirts.
Yeah. So, wait. Now I need to. It's yeah. The T-shirt absolutely threw me off. I wanted to like create like a segue into the talking bit, which was going to be yes. And with Nicholas, we have devised a battle plan for the future of this project I've been making. So let's give it a bit of thought, and also a an amusing way to call it, but a post-mortem on my engine, which is basically talking about what went wrong, what went right, and trying to learn from it. So let's begin. Okay, so now imagine the post-mortem thing being here, so it doesn't feel as weird.
Mhm.
And an ending, or did we record an ending? Didn't we? No, we recorded the ending of the post-mortem. Now, like, just a send
Yep.
off into the dark.
Yep.
So that's about it for this video. Again, huge thanks to Nicolas, because absolutely an amazing person and one of the most fun people to talk to that I've ever met. Because like when you have someone in who knows a lot more about a topic than you do, a topic you are interested in, and the person also has an amazing personality as Nicolas does, that's a very fun way to spend time.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed that, and I'm really happy to hear these sort of things. That's what in general I thrive for. So I'm glad that I hit that goal.
So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you hopefully sooner than in 11 months. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Okay, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
this is actually going to see the light of day because the video itself is almost finished. I was going to send to you like a
Yeah.
cutout segment of the one of the fun part where you are being a little bit annoyed about me still. But like I said to myself, no, when the thing is done, I'm going to send it to him because then it's going to be more fun for him to view it
Sounds good.
as a total thing. So yeah, I'm going to give it like 5 to 7 days before you can see the whole thing done, and yeah, then we can release it. So that's
Perfect.
about it. And now I have a very important hockey cup to watch.
Okay.
Yeah, us Czechs are fanatics about, like, we are even more hardcore than Canadians.
All right. I didn't know about that. It's interesting.
That's like yeah, it's crazy. So again, thanks so much. Like here, out of the interview, it means the world to me. Like having like
Anytime.
someone I can like, I don't want to say rely on because I don't want this to sound like a thing that is going to be always there because I don't want to force that idea upon you. But like really, it really helps, and like the level of understanding of the platform itself and even of low level development as a whole, I gained from this journey, if I call it so. Uh, like it's amazing, and I learned a lot. So thanks again.
Anytime. And honestly, working with you on these sort of things was very nice. It's always, I mean, without going too far into personal development or whatever, I think I told you that you remind me a little bit of myself. And so, that is definitely, there's something very nice and agreeable to see from somebody going through the same sort of steps I did when I was your age. So yeah, it's not a one-way street. I got a lot out of it as well.
Yeah, that's just amazing, and just like the thought of like in the very beginning of the channel, the PlayStation 1 video wasn't even meant to be public. It was supposed to be a fun thing I can
Yeah.
send out to my friends, and bandwidth itself, the channel itself was created 3 years prior to that video,
Mhm.
when kids nowadays, including me, have their phases. Okay, let's be a YouTuber. And 3 years ago, I just created like a graphic, and then I gave up because I had some other stuff to work on. And then just things happened. I created the video for my friends. I uploaded it. It was actually unlisted for the first few weeks, and the only reason it's bandwidth is because it was the channel I was selected on at the moment when I wanted to upload it. That's the only reason. And then, I was in the middle of summer doing some programming with friends. We have actually this very fun university in here is, making this amazing programmers camp, which is like low level stuff, not like JavaScript, actually explaining x86 hardware and stuff. It's really fun.
Mhm.
And I just randomly opened my phone, and there was like 111 notifications from YouTube, and then I just watched the numbers skyrocket. So I was like, okay, the numbers are high. Let's just turn on monetization here. Yeah, okay. So yeah, in the Czech Republic, it's not a lot of money. It's like $11 a month.
Well,
But yeah, you can buy a kebab or two for that.
and, here's hoping
But
to get more numbers anyway.
yeah, like no, like I will be doing it even without the monetization. It's that amount of fun, and I'm the kind of person,
Yes.
it's obvious. I'm very talkative, although introverted, very introverted, but I like to talk, and I also love to code, and I also started doing some art stuff, because I started programming. I wrote my first Minecraft server Java plugin in when I was 8, maybe 9. And I've been doing nothing but that for the entirety of my life, basically the only hobby. So my brain got a little scrambled and I needed something less exact, something less mathematics. So I started trying out some art stuff, and the fact that this opportunity opened, which is like the perfect way to combine art with programming. You
Yep.
can be yourself. You can talk. I can talk my head out. I can do the art stuff, which doesn't have to be exact. And actually, the less exact it is, the better it is. And mixing the stuff I'm good at and I love to do as well.
Yep. The only reason I got into programming was because of video games. I always wanted to write video games.
Yeah, it was Minecraft for me. It was Minecraft for me. That was just. I'm a real sucker for sandbox games. I never really liked games. I'm not a very competitive person. I
I'm not a
hate
competitive person at
competitions,
all.
and that's why I love games which are not about. That's why I played Garry's
Mhm.
mode in Minecraft so much. In Minecraft, I almost
Right.
exclusively played creative mode because
Right.
I have this very sentimental thought that I like to play games where it's multiplayer games, to be exact, in which it's not about to be better than someone else, but it's about to create something beautiful with someone.
I only play co-op games.
Yeah, exactly. Like I did have my Counter Strike like phase of my life, and yeah, it's not fun. Like that's that. So okay, I think that
All
wraps it up
right.
pretty well. I have like 2% left on this random MacBook. It's actually the same MacBook I tested PCSX Redux on,
Cool.
and it worked pretty well. It ran Parasite Eve, and that was all I needed. But like the
All right.
one problem I found, but is based probably with ImGUI. How do you read EMGUI? How do you read that out loud?
I say imgui.
Me too in Czech exactly, but it sounds weird. But like in ImGUI, it's probably a problem with that. But like the scale of the of the text of the ImGUI elements is huge, like humongous. Like
Uh,
the
there's probably
emulation
bugs in
tab
there.
took
Yeah.
up like a sixth of my screen.
The EMGUI is mostly developed on Windows, so
Yeah.
there are still some bugs on Linux. There are still some bugs on macOS, and it's difficult to go and fix that. Also, the DPI
Yeah, DPI, yes.
value is actually sent by not EMGUI but by GLFW. Uh, it's
Wow.
there's a library called GLFW,
Yeah,
which is the one handling Windows and
yeah.
keyboard and mouse input and joysticks.
I have
So
had my
like all
fair
of the
share of
IO.
using that. I wrote a few engines and yeah, it wasn't fun. Since I
So
moved to SDL, life has been easier.
so yeah, if you have a problem, if you have a DPI problem, that's most likely in GLFW, and that's probably worth investigating a bit. But yeah.
Yeah.
All
Again, thanks
right.
so much. This
Absolutely.
laptop is going to die in like a matter
Yep.
of tens of seconds, so yeah, that wraps it up. Goodbye, and thanks once more. I will keep you posted on the progress. And
Sounds
once the
good.
video gets out, we can start actually working.
Cool.
Bye!
Bye bye.